Hi everyone, this is Ashley Lategi Ellenboss with Sky House Herb School and Apothecary. And today I'll be looking at COVID and panic attacks and slash anxiety and looking at the similarities that they share and why this is so troublesome right now. I'll also be discussing herbs that can be helpful when you're experiencing anxiety and panic, and hopefully share some stories that will help you not feel alone and help you feel understood as you're going through this pandemic with all of us. So I'm curious to know how many of you that are listening right now have been experiencing higher states of anxiety or have had panic attacks in the last 6 months since COVID began. For myself, I never really had anxiety before COVID hit. You know, I would get worried about things and maybe a little anxious for big events, but nothing like I'm experiencing in my own body now. I've heard so many friends and so many clients and so many students talk about their experience over the last 6 months with heightened levels of anxiety and increasing amounts of panic attacks. So I know for myself, when I had my first panic attack of the season, I thought for sure I had COVID, because the symptoms overlap, and that's the sort of scary thing is that how do we tease out, is this something I need to be really, worried about, like concerned about, like, are these symptoms the fact that maybe I can't breathe or I'm having chest pain? Is this a sign that I have COVID, or is this just related to anxiety and panic? So we're going to kind of tease those apart a little bit. But I wanted to share my story with you because looking back now, I can laugh about it, but at the time it was very, very scary. And it might be you might have a similar story in your back pocket from these last few months. So here's how mine went. I was sleeping soundly. I think it was maybe late March, early April, and I woke up to dry coughing, just a fit of coughing. And, I co-sleep with my girls. So I woke up coughing. My girls are next to me, and I'm like, oh no, it's a dry cough. And do I have a fever? And I'm like, okay, I don't think I have a fever, but I have a dry cough. And then I was like, oh gosh, I can't breathe. Like I'm having a hard time breathing. And so the combination of dry cough, thinking about the fact that I might have COVID, and started leading me down the road of a panic attack. So I started going through all the worst case scenarios, like, okay, so I'm gonna die, and I've given it to my children and they might die, or maybe they'll live and I'll die and they won't have a mom. Where did I get it? How could I have been so careless? Like, what was I thinking? I didn't wipe down, that box of whatever, like I and so, I started going down this rabbit hole, and my chest got tighter and tighter and tighter until I was gasping for air. And this was, again, like 3:30 in the morning, and my husband comes down like, what's going on? I'm like, I can't breathe. And I was like, I think I have COVID. I can't breathe. I don't know what's going on. He was like, I think you're having a panic attack. You just need to, let's just calm down. And I was like, no, I'm sure I have COVID. I'm sure, like, I'm dying. I don't know if we should call, like, I can't breathe. Like, my chest is so tight. So, thankfully, he's a very good partner, and he just started rubbing my shoulders and just telling me to take some deep breaths, started running me a bath, and I started taking all of my herbs, and it took me probably about 15-20 minutes and then a bath to actually get myself calmed down. And I started breathing okay again. so so it wasn't COVID. It was a panic attack is what that was. And I don't know if any of you have had something like that. I know since that time, I've had several times where, like, let's just say, like I pass someone on our walking trail, and they're not wearing a mask, and I start instantly feeling like my chest is getting tighter, and I'm like, did I just get COVID? Like, did they just breathe COVID into me? Like, I can't breathe. Like, my chest is tight. Is that the virus starting to like attack my body? You know, it's like there are these wormholes we can go down with COVID because number one, it is a scary thing, and number two, it is around us, and you know, it can be life threatening. So I was talking with one of my girlfriends, and she was saying that she's been having a lot of chest pain lately, and she's been having, you know, difficulty breathing too, relating to her anxiety, but also, you know, she's had the same fears come up. Like every time she starts to get short of breath, she thinks I have COVID, and then that feeds the cycle. So this is something that we want to be extra mindful of because, you know, not all panic attacks can be stopped, but a lot of them can be shortened. And, you know, we can lessen the severity of them. And that's what I'm hoping to help you with today, is to educate you a little bit about the differences. So in that moment, or maybe, you know, listening to this, if you're starting to feel like you're going down that hole, you know, you can start to say, okay, well, what is really going on here? Now, before I go into the sort of differential diagnosis of like what is the difference between the two sets of COVID symptoms and panic attack symptoms, I wanted to just like, for myself even, just explore like, well, why so much more anxiety these days? Like it can't just be the stress of COVID, because, you know, we've all had long periods of stress in our lives for whatever reason, and we didn't have anxiety or panic attacks. So what's different? So as I was thinking about it, here are the things that really stand out to me. The first one is social confinement and isolation. So when we don't have the peer review and peer solidarity around us, you know, we don't have people to talk with, that means we also don't have as many opportunities to process our lives and to process what's going on moment to moment. So the fact that most of us are social distancing or isolating in some way is also leading to, I think, yeah, like less processing and greater feelings of isolation. So that's one piece. Another piece is, I think a lot of us are getting potentially less exercise. Now, maybe not everyone, but I think this is contributing for a lot of people, because when we exercise, we burn off cortisol, and cortisol is our stress hormone that puts us into that fight or flight state. So when we go running, when we get our blood pressure up in a healthy way, right, cardiovascular activity, we start to burn away and process and you know, deconjugate this this cortisol in our body and break it down. So when we're more sedentary, we are more apt to have higher levels of resting cortisol. The other thing is comfort-seeking food choices, right? Because you know, maybe we're not as motivated to make good food choices. And also when we're under stress, we tend to reach towards gratifying foods like sweets and savory things and salty for some people. And, you know, depending on what your crutch kind of food category is. So these comfort-seeking food choices might also be setting our blood sugar up for imbalance, which can definitely increase anxiety and the risk of a panic attack. So these are all things that we want to think about if this is something that you're experiencing, is how can I get more movement, especially like really getting the heart rate going? How do I really try to limit my sugar, alcohol, caffeine, all of the things that we know can disrupt blood sugar and increase anxiety? And how do we reach out more? How do we become more socially engaged and make sure that we're talking through what's going on in our minds and what's going on in our hearts? And you know, we add COVID. If we're not doing all of these things, and then we add a pandemic on top of it, it's like the perfect recipe for a panic attack. So we really more than ever need to be taking really good care of ourselves for our, not only just for our physiological well-being and for our immune systems, but also for our mental well-being. So let's take a look at the anxiety, panic attacks versus COVID, what they have in common and what's different. So what they have in common is that they have the symptoms of difficulty breathing, maybe gasping to get a breath, struggling to get a breath, tightness or pressure in the chest, and then also heart arrhythmia or heart palpitations, feeling like your heart might be skipping a beat, and then some chest pain. So those are all symptoms that are shared by both COVID and anxiety and panic attacks, but there are some big differences. So some things that are an indication of COVID that is not an indication of a panic attack is that the symptoms, they usually develop over days, okay? So this tightness of the chest and difficulty breathing is happening over a long period of time, and it's getting worse and worse. Now, with a panic attack, it usually comes on quickly and it ends quickly. That is within about 15 to 20, sometimes 30 minutes, okay? So that's a very, very different timeline. So that's one thing that you can think about when you're trying to figure out what's going on. Also, panic attacks are not accompanied by any other symptoms. It's usually just simply tightness of the chest, difficulty breathing, whereas with COVID, there's most commonly other symptoms involved, including fever, chills, sometimes there's GI upset, coughing is another big one, or any sort of flu-like symptoms. So those symptoms accompanied with the feeling of tightness in the chest, that might be more likely. But again, if the timeline doesn't match, then it's not a match. Also, panic attacks usually seem to come on quickly based on worry, fear, and obsessive thought that's happening. So they can sort of be escalated by what your mind is doing. Whereas COVID-related symptoms, no matter, you could be thinking about like lotus flowers on a still lake, and it would still, you would still have difficulty breathing and have those flu-like symptoms. So, that's, if you're going down the rabbit hole of like, all the things you did wrong or what you wanted to do before you die, you're likely in the panic attack zone. And the obsessive thoughts will usually drive the fear, and that will also drive the panic. So, as much as you can, try to get yourself out of that place. But I hope this is helpful to see them, to think about those like side by side, and then you can start to really think about it. Okay, well, this sounds a lot more like panic symptoms than it does sound like COVID symptoms. Now, Psychology Today published an article called Anxiety versus Coronavirus, How to Tell the Difference. So if you want to read more about this and some of the other symptoms of generalized anxiety and generalized anxiety disorder, that might be helpful for you too. And I think this was published sometime late March. And so that's a resource that you can also look up. But one thing to realize is that it's very normal for us right now to have heightened anxiety and to be experiencing symptoms like this. Like, I think this is a very human response to what is going on. So what can we do? What are some of the things that we might be able to do to help us here? And along with all of the lifestyle things I mentioned, I wanted to talk now about plants, what plants are specifically helpful. And I have a few of them here with me to show you. Now, I'm going to be talking about tinctures because tinctures are very easy to take in a pinch. So if you're starting to experience, tightness in your chest, you're starting to go down that path of fear and all of that, then you definitely want to have something very quick that you can take. You might not have the time or the bandwidth to create a tea or make a blend of tea. So tinctures, again, are going to be your fast, easy, quickest bet. The first plant is motherwort, Leonaris cardiaca, and this one is made by Herb Farm. It's a really great company. I think they're based out of Oregon. Let me turn it. There we go. And so this is a really nice, it's made with the leaf and the flowering top. And motherwort is a really nice one for general anxiety, for panic. I think of it as like a very stern mother. I recently met this plant in the wild, and I was astounded by how prickly it was. Like, I had seen it in gardens, but and in the gardens it was prickly, but in the wild it's like really like, wow. So to me, it's not just like the soft mother that's going to like wrap you up in her arms. To me, it's like, it's helpful in anxiety because it's the mother that talks some sense into you, who says, all right, you need to cut that out. Like, get back on your feet, take a cold shower, and get back to work. So motherwort is going to just sort of help you kind of like redirect your energy. It's also a really good heart medicine, so it can be very helpful with heart palpitations. um, so if that's part of your symptom picture, is heart palpitations or tightness in the chest, then motherwort would be a really nice one for you. The dosage is 1 to 2 dropperfuls 3 times a day, just for general anxiety maintenance. But if you're in the midst of a panic attack, I would do 2 to 3 droppers full, um, sort of like over the course of that panic attack. So maybe you would do 1 dropper full about every 5 minutes. And again, just sort of spreading out that dosing so that it can have, it can kind of help you in waves to get through that moment. The second plant is blue vervain, and this was a tincture that I made, so it doesn't have a fancy label. But this is a really, really nice plant. I've talked about it in other videos, so you can watch them if you want to learn more about blue vervain. But it's a cooling, bitter relaxant. And so I think about this as when the anxiety is having your shoulders kind of creep up towards your ears, and that the anxiety is coupled with tension in the jaw, in the neck, shoulders, this whole area of the body. If that's where the tension really comes to you, then that would be a really good herb. It's also really good for the obsessive perfectionist type. So when you're having anxiety, if part of the pattern is that you're obsessing about something that you didn't do right, or that you should have done better, or you could have done, as my grandmother would say, shoulda, woulda, coulda. You shoulda, woulda, coulda, the Sicilian thing. So, if you go into that shoulda, woulda, coulda, blue vervain will help kind of unravel that and let that go. Now, this is a stronger plant. I would do maybe half a dropper full 3 times a day as a kind of a regular daily dose. But in an acute situation, I would do probably 2 droppers full in a little bit of water and take it. And it will kind of snap you out of whatever state you're in pretty quickly. And then you can do that a few more times as needed. The third herb is, oh, I don't think I said the Latin name. It's Verbena hastata is the Latin name for blue vervain. The third herb is mimosa, and this was a mimosa tincture made for me by one of my herbal student graduates as a wedding gift. So I've had this, gosh, I've been married, I guess, like 8 years, and it's still so amazing. And this is Albizia julibrescens, and it comes from the beautiful mimosa tree. And this medicine, what I like about it for anxiety and panic attacks is that this plant is also called the tree of happiness, and it's really good for anxiety coupled with depression. So if your anxiety isn't just anxiety, but there's an underlying sort of depressive quality going on too, then this is a very cheerful plant. And it will kind of help cheer you out of the depression and the stuckness of the sort of darker spaces you might go into, but it also takes down the anxiety. So it's really nice in that way as it works with both. The dosage would be 1 dropper full 3 times a day for just general management, and then you could do 1 dropper full every 5 minutes in the case of an acute panic attack. The other medicine I wanted to talk about is cannabis sativa. And there's 2 different forms of this that could be very, very helpful. One is CBD, which is the cannabidiols that are taken out of the cannabis plant. And CBD has a ton of research, ton of studies. It's really, really nice for lowering anxiety. Some of the main, the endocannabinoids that we produce in our body are called anandamides, and ananda is a Sanskrit word which means bliss. So that we have this endogenous, which means self-made cannabinoid called anandamide. So our bodies have receptors just waiting for these cannabinoids. And so, part of feeling blissful is sort of being a little bit detached and a little bit more relaxed. So CBD is a really, really nice one. You can buy CBD without THC. So if you're THC sensitive, some people are, then you can buy it without. I have found in my practice that having 0.3% THC is actually they've been shown in research that it actually makes the other cannabinoids more active. So I usually recommend that. It's not enough to have a psychoactive effect, but it's enough to really give you a more broad spectrum of the plant. And I found it to be more helpful, especially with pain and also with anxiety. So that's CBD. There's a lot of different brands out there. Try to find one that is organic if possible and grown, grown in good conditions, as some of them are really, really mass produced. But you can follow the dosage on the bottles because there's different strengths of CBD. So you just want to look at, look at the strengths and follow the directions. Now, for whole plant cannabis, I have a friend, her name is Rochelle Baca. She is like a cannabis whisperer. She's an incredible woman who's been studying this plant medicine and working with it for decades. And, she really is a big proponent of using the whole plant in a tincture or glycerate form because of the powers of THCA. And THCA has been really helpful with Parkinson's, anxiety, depression, a huge number of different ailments. And it has a more and more growing research on it. And she makes the most amazing, delicious medicines. So this is one of the medicines that she made that I have. It's called Sacred Plant Medicine. And this one in particular is the one that I'm going to recommend for anxiety and panic attacks. It's called Canna Rose Hips Glycerate. So it's basically a whole plant glycerate using with added rose hips, and it tastes like rose. It's just delicious and beautiful and very, very gentle, and it has THCA in it, and so you get all the benefits of that medicine. To reach her, you can visit Sacred Plant Herbal Teachings, and just Google that, and you can Google her name, Rochelle Baca. She is more than happy to answer any questions. She's an incredible resource and teacher. So I'll post a link in the description section or in the comments section so that you can find that. Last two plants, skullcap and wild lettuce. So these two plants are similar in that they really kind of help with obsessive thinking. However, skullcap is kind of like when you're thinking about a million things at the same time and they're just all spinning around your head. Skullcap, which is Scutellaria lateriflora. This particular skull cap is really good at, it's like a warm blanket on your head that just sort of calms everything down. This one can be taken 1 dropper full 3 times a day, or 1 dropper full or 2 droppers full in an acute situation. Wild lettuce is for obsessive thoughts, but it's one thought. It's like your brain, Matthew Wood describes it as like your brain gets hooked on one thought and you can't let that one thought go. Like maybe something that happened earlier in the day, or just something you can't get out of your mind. And so wild lettuce helps you sort of unhook from that one obsessive thought. I've also used it for people with night terrors and recurring nightmares, and it seems to work really, really well. It's a stronger plant, so I would use about 30 drops before bed if you're using it for nightmares or night terrors. You can go up to 60 drops. And in an acute situation, just do about 10 drops every 10 minutes, and that should sort of help the unhooking and help your body calm down a little bit. So I hope this is helpful. And yeah, I mean, we're living through extraordinary times, and the plants are here to support us and help us. And I hope by me sharing my story and story, and knowing that there are people in my circle that are experiencing this, that you don't feel so alone, or maybe, the people you are caring for, if they're experiencing these symptoms, you can realize that there's a lot of other people, and you can reassure them that they're going to be okay, and that there are things we can do to support ourselves. And also, I think one thing we can do is just reach out to one another. Just give people a call every once in a while, send an email, send a love package. My friend recently sent me this beautiful little gift for my new house, this little women's card and 2 braids of sweetgrass. Her name is Hillary, and she runs Sacred Roots Herbal Sanctuary in West Virginia. And she sells herbs, but this was her gift to me for our new home. And I'm going to be putting together a little gift package for her. So things like that, just what are some little things you can do so that people can feel connected and feel supported? So thank you for listening. Please share your comments, share any herbs or any exercises or practices that you're doing or using to help yourself through these times. And I look forward to reading them and responding. All right, thanks everyone again. Take care. Bye-bye.